Hello everyone, it's me, Ewan from What Culture. That was the 60s Batman TV show noise, and today I'm joined by Zoe. Existing to talk to you about another thing that exists, the Batmobile from the upcoming Batman reboot being directed by the Bat-tastic Bat Reeves. It's actually Matt Reeves. I just did a pun because Bat sounds similar to Matt. Yeah, he went on Twitter yesterday and basically showed off 3 sexy shots of the Batmobile at various different angles, and it looks really, really, really cool. It's like the classic Batmobile that you see in the comics. And yeah, Zoe, what is your take on it so far?
Well, the one thing I didn't dislike about the Batman video game series is that it made
the Arkham one.
Yeah, the Arkham series. Is that it made what was conventionally an acceptable Batmobile into a tank, and it has been a trend amongst a lot of like Bat media or whatever to have this car become something very bulky. And although it's cool, it's always very cool. It's also very not Batman.
Yes.
It's not like, oh, and then I sneak around in my tank.
Yes.
So I'm very, very happy about this because it marks sort of a respect of like how the character would actually interact with the universe, which I'm very about.
I completely agree, and I think there's a general, I saw yesterday there was a lot of excitement for it, and I'm very, very excited about this Batmobile design, which I'll get to in a second, but there was a lot of negative backlash as well, which I was slightly confused by, because I think, you know, one thing that people tend to forget is that before Burton's film came around in 1989, Batman's car was literally just a car that he painted blue and black and stuck a few fins on and a few symbols here and there and was like, there we go. Literally his first car in the comics was just a red car. It literally was. And this design reminds me so much of the 80s and 70s Batmobiles that we tended to get. There was someone I follow on Twitter, he basically replied to me yesterday pointing out that the Batmobile that Jason Todd steals the wheel off in Batman 408, I believe it is, kind of looks very, very similar. And this is very much a muscle car aesthetic. It takes inspiration from seemingly loads of different designs. And the thing I want to kind of reiterate with this news video is that this Batmobile is actually the most faithful Batmobile we've had since the 1960s show. That's not a slight. Yeah, it's not a slight against the Burton Mobile, which I love, or the Batman animated series Batmobile, which I also love, or the Tumbler, which I do have kind of a thing for. It's just that, you know, as a matter of like history, this is definitely the most faithful Batmobile we've had in half a century.
I think it possibly, I don't want to speculate too much because, as you know, I've speculated like several different ways about what this film could be, but I think it possibly says some very positive things about the film in terms of how it deals with source material. Obviously, with comic films, we've learned that you don't have to be entirely accurate, as much as some people will be like, well, actually. But at the same time, I do feel like a level of respect is a weird way to word it, but sort of at least some sort of homage moments, and I think this is a perfect way to do it. I
think there's a great deal of, from what we've heard from Reeves' films so far, I definitely think there is a reverence for the source material in terms of, you know, those, and he's pulling the story, I feel, from loads of different angles, and it's almost kind of exemplified by the Batmobile itself. To me, in the taillights, you can see a little bit of the animated series in there. The actual black, again, comes from more modern Batmobile designs, and then the actual chassis of the car itself reminds me so much of those, you know, Batman stories from the 80s and 70s, which again raises all sorts of questions regarding the setting of the film too, because there have been a lot of rumors over the last since the film kind of began production, and we had all those leaked set photos, that the film could be set not in, you know, not necessarily in the past, but certainly in a timeless way. And judging from what the car looks like, and if we're going to say, you know, this is the Batman at the beginning of his career, certainly it looks as though at the very least it could be a timeless setting, pulling in influences from the 80s and 90s, if not entirely being set in the past.
What are your thoughts about having it set there, though? Because it's such an interesting way to go for me. I'd never thought about it, but something that deals with it in a different way, almost like Gotham by Gaslight, which was this old sort of Victorian version of him. I think it's a really clever way to go about it.
Yeah, I mean, to me, again, my favorite interpretation of Batman will always be the animated stuff from the 90s, and to me, that was the perfect definition of a timeless kind of, you know, thing. It took heavy inspiration from the Fleischer Superman shorts in the 1940s, and really pulled together this like timeless 40s kind of aesthetic. You know, we talk about Art Deco style and retrofuturism, and then mashed it together with stuff from the 90s. And I thought that really worked for the show, so I wouldn't be surprised now if maybe we have a whole thing where it's like, well, we'll take that same mantra, but instead of taking stuff from, you know, the Art Deco and retrofuturistic things we had back in the day, we'll actually take it from the 80s and apply that to the modern day setting, which I think would be really, really cool.
Just want disco Batman.
Yeah, I completely agree. But yeah, like all the different parts of the Batmobile itself, I just think look really, really cool. I love the Batsuit in that image where you can see him kind of illuminating illuminated by the headlights of it. You know, it's grey, it's black. I'm kind of really happy that, you know, after Batman v Superman came out, that was like the signaling the movie's clean break away from, we're going to put Batman just in a pure black outfit.
Well, I also think it's smart in terms of if we are going for sort of a less technologically advanced Batman, I think that's a very clever way to play it, because the one issue I think he's had as a character in films, it's sort of the same problem Iron Man has, where if you have a character who's very good with technology, you can very easily make it sort of a deus ex machina, where it's like, oh, and then he does a technology thing and saves the day. So to have him be like, I'm just in my muscle car trying to fight crime, I think that's a really, like, a much better angle to go at it from.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, you know, there's all sorts of questions this raises about Batman's allies, I guess, in the thing here. You're talking about him being like, you know, this is him at the beginning of his career. You have to ask, is Alfred been involved in the design of this thing? Obviously, anyone who was familiar with the animated show will know that he actually had a mechanic called Earl Cooper who worked on the Batmobile, and there was an episode called The Mechanic where Penguin steals the controls to the Batmobile after finding out where Bruce's mechanic was. So I'm curious to see maybe if we'll see inspiration taken from there. I have no idea. I would love the Batmobile to be like a big focal point in the film, because obviously we see, you know, in the leaked set videos from Glasgow, he was obviously on a motorcycle. So I'm curious to see how he kind of basically, maybe he has a bad run-in with the bike and he's like, I need more protection, and that's where the Batmobile comes into thing.
Well, it's also a smart way, because the one thing I was thinking about is when you compare it to many others, it's not as it's solid, but it's not as like impenetrable as a lot of others are. I do think sometimes the way they use the Batmobile is like this little safe cube that he can go sit in. So it's, I think, much more exciting, especially if we're hoping for this more almost noir aesthetic, for it to be like, well, he's not safe anywhere. He's not safe even in the things he gets to try and be more safe. So good luck, man.
There's definitely an element of risk involved, which I really like. You know, the Bat, like you said, it's not just this invulnerable thing. You see the engine is kind of exposed on the rear. We have the booster on the back as well to go with all the tail lights, which again, I just think looks absolutely fantastic. And you know, the way Reeves has gone about talking about this film has got me genuinely really excited. I think I was back when Batman v Superman was first announced, and I don't really care for any of the Snyder stuff that DC did. I was kind of, there was a tepid enthusiasm where I was like, you know what, I actually think Ben Affleck's a really cool choice of the character, and then the suit dropped and I was like, oh wow, they're going full Miller here, that's pretty exciting. But with here, I feel as though Reeves is taking such, he's kind of taking this similar approach to the animated series did, where he, you know, they looked at all these different facets of Batman's, you know, history and pulled them into one interpretation. You know, he was on Twitter a few years back talking about how much love he has for stories like Batman Ego and other stuff. And to me, everything I've seen so far, the Batman just looks like a really cool noir detective flick with some cool gadgetry involved and an awesome suit. And, you know, I'm kind of here for everything that we've seen so far.
I think you've hit on a really good thing there when you said about Miller, because when I think about it, yeah, it feels very Miller-esque. It feels very like when you think about Batman comics, what you actually think about. And I think as much as because I'm a big old dork, I've loved every film with Batman in it, even ones that maybe weren't so good.
I mean, we all love Batman Forever. There's no sad confession there to make. We're all a big fan of Batman Forever.
But also, I feel like a lot of them have missed the vibe, and that they either go way too dark, and it's like, I didn't want full goth, we're in Gotham. Or it's a bit too like, and he can kill anyone and fight anyone and save the day. And although, yeah, that is who he is on a lot of levels, I think it's also much more exciting to focus on like the fact that he can't do everything.
Yes.
Sometimes he's just a dude in a cool car.
Yeah, and again, I think you raised the point there earlier as well about the fact that, you know, vulnerability is such an intrinsic part of the character and something that kind of gets lost in certain interpretations of him. And that's why I was a little bit kind of, again, when we did the video on the actual Batsuit being revealed, I was a little bit kind of like, oh, I kind of wanted it to be a little bit less armored and, you know, more cloth-like, because at the end of the day, they're superheroes, who gives a toss whether they're practical or whatever. But again, I think maybe the way it looks here, it definitely doesn't look as like rigid or bulky as we've seen in Justice League or like, you know, in the Arkham games. It looks genuinely like a Batsuit coupled together by a really angsty billionaire orphan. And the same goes to the car itself. And I love how this is all coming into play. And the thing that I'm most looking forward to now is seeing what Gotham looks like itself, because we've had the set photos, we've had different leaks of how different things are blending together. But right now, I'm really excited to see how this all pulls together, because obviously he's been filming in Glasgow, been filming in London, there's been some stuff going down in Chicago again as well. I'm really curious to see how it ends up looking on the screen.
I'm also excited in the sense of, for a very long time, I was very concerned that DC would go to MCU with their stuff, which they could do and would still work, but you don't want all films to have the same tone. And although I know it's a vaguely controversially received film, I am glad of the success of The Joker, because I think films like this, people aren't like, oh, what's this weird thing? They're like, oh, this could genuinely be like quite a complex, deep film.
And like you say, again, that's a very important point to make because comics are never just... People talk about the superhero genre, right? And again, it is a genre, but within that genre, there lie different subgenres. I sound like Benoit Blanc with his bloody donuts now, but literally there are so many different working parts going into here. And Batman as a character has his roots in the noir genre. So I'm really excited to see how that comes into effect and whether or not, we're going to get a full-blown, not hard-boiled kind of crime film, but certainly in the vein of like those classic Batman stories we tend to associate with the likes of Dennis O'Neil and Neil Adams and that sort of thing. I'm really excited to see how that actually comes into effect because there is so much going on here. I'm hoping that we get a trailer probably in the next couple of months, I want to say.
We'll watch it too much.
I mean, obviously the filming is going to continue for a while, so the trailer probably won't be here. But anyway, I'm really excited to see all the leaks that can go. I want to see what Colin Farrell's going to look like in the film. I want to see what, oh my God, Riddler as well. I'm really excited for this film. I'm really, really excited.
It's hard not to be fair.
Yeah, please let us know what you think of the new Batmobile down in the comments below. Does it rev your engine or does it leave you needing some petrol? That is the best car-related thing I could come up with. Once you've done that, please be sure to head back on over to whatculture.com for more news, lists, and articles like this every day. You can follow me on Twitter at Ewan Ruins Things, where I'll just be going blah about the Batmobile every single night from now on. And you can follow Zoe on Twitter at
Same Skill, where I might tweet eventually.
Occasionally.
Occasionally.
They won't. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.